He never imagined that words with all their vastness could feel so small. Small in comparison to what he felt, to what he wished to express. Sometimes he found himself overwhelmed by the need to show, to convey, to share what dwelled deep within his soul. But at the same time, something paralyzed him. Fear, a constant shadow that made him hesitate, often made him swallow what should come out of his mouth but didn't. It was always like this. The desire to confess, to reveal the depth of his affection, always with an intensity capable of transforming everything around, but the dread of an unexpected reaction, of something he could not control, made him pull back. And at that specific moment, something much greater than words was at stake. He was preparing a surprise. The decision had been made. He had convinced himself, after weeks of uncertainty and sleepless nights, that he needed to show once and for all how important that person was. But what seemed like something simple, perhaps a confession, had turned into a whirlwind of thoughts. What would the reaction be? He, always so attentive to details, knew that a simple glance, a word, a subtle gesture could change everything. But what if it were the opposite? What if, instead of a smile, he encountered a look of confusion, of uncomfortable surprise, or even of coldness? What if it was too much? What if he was just another one who fell into the trap of confusing affection with pressure? He wanted it to be perfect, more than anything. He wanted that gesture to be worthy of the immense affection he felt. But he knew, deep down, that expectations could be a poison. He stood still for a moment, looking at the plan he had drawn up in his mind. He was thinking about the possibilities. What if she doesn't like it? What if I create an uncomfortable situation? These questions echoed in his mind like an endless refrain. He didn't want to be naive, but he also didn't want to hide behind excuses. He wanted to take a chance. Yet somewhere deep inside him there was a persistent feeling. Maybe I'm just fooling myself. Maybe she doesn't see it the same way. Maybe I'm alone in this feeling. It was all very complicated, but he couldn't give up. Not now. So he took a deep breath once again and started to plan. In this planning, every detail was crucial. Every move had to be perfect. It was as if everything, even the smallest gesture, was at stake. The plan takes shape. The place was chosen. It would be something intimate, something unique that reflected the moments they had shared together. Nothing too extravagant, but meaningful. The choice wasn't made lightly. He wanted a space that brought with it a sense of warmth and familiarity, something that would be the perfect representation of what they had built together up to that point. He searched for the restaurant, the arrangements, the ideal location. It couldn't just be any place. Each element needed to be thought out in a way that reinforced the message he wanted to convey. After all, what did he want? He wanted her to feel, in a palpable way, how much he was willing to invest in that moment. But more than that, he wanted her to know how much she meant to him. Because deep down, it wasn't just about a dinner or a surprise. It was about the silent promise that he was there, investing, wanting to build something lasting. But the fear wouldn't stop haunting him. With each step he took, he found himself further away from his comfort zone. He could already picture himself there at the restaurant, with soft lights in the background, the wine serving as a pretext for a more intimate, more honest conversation. But what would happen after that? What would she say? He thought about each word, each sentence. How could he do this without being overwhelmed by anxiety, without showing insecurity? The preparations were progressing, and although he knew each decision was being made with care, the fear still lingered. He didn't know how to deal with it. Perhaps it was the weight of wanting everything to be perfect. Maybe it was the fact that he had never exposed himself so much before. He couldn't quite put it into words, but the feeling of insecurity was not just in his mind. He felt it physically, a knot in his throat, a tightness in his chest, his stomach in knots. He couldn't let fear take control of him. No, not this time. The confrontation with insecurity. On the day of the event, he woke up early. The sun had barely risen and he was already up, making the final adjustments. He thought about every detail, but as the moment approached, his nervousness increased. He felt like an actor about to step onto the stage, aware that despite his efforts, everything could go wrong. The hours began to pass in a strange way, as if time were toying with him. He tried to distract himself, but his mind kept returning to the same doubt. What if she doesn't like it? What if it's all a disaster? Every memory of a gesture or word she might have said in the past popped into his mind, as if they were clues to anticipate the future. But at the same time, There was a force inside him, pushing him forward, telling him, "Don't back down now." It was as if he knew deep down that he needed to do this. He couldn't continue living with the weight of doubt. Whatever the reaction might be, that surprise was what he needed to give. The romantic gesture was, above all, a way to assert himself, to show that he wasn't afraid to be vulnerable. That afternoon was a test, an attempt to put his heart ahead of reason, to expose himself without reservations. He didn't know what would happen, but he knew that the only way to find out was to move forward. He prepared himself and dressed carefully. At that moment, he just wanted everything to go right. He couldn't imagine, even for a second, that fate could be different. What he knew deep down was that, regardless of what happened, the surprise was already a reflection of his commitment to what he felt. More than the outcome, the act itself was already worth it. He left the house with an unexpected lightness. Something inside him seemed to have shifted, as if the weight of insecurity was finally dissipating, even if just temporarily. With each step, his heart raced a little faster, but there was also a feeling that the path was becoming clearer, more defined. He knew what he wanted. Now all he had to do was wait and see how she would react. The place was softly lit, creating an atmosphere he had envisioned perfectly. He had visited the location several times before, but today felt different. Today, he wasn't just looking for a good meal or a quiet place to pass the time. Today, he was there to create something, to build a memory. When he arrived, the setting was exactly what he wanted. The table was set, the wine was already poured, and soft music played in the background. But at the same time, nervousness began to creep back in. The anticipation felt overwhelming. What would she think of all this? Had he done the right thing by thinking it through like this? He had spent so much time worrying about the details that, in the end, it all seemed too grand and intense for a simple dinner. Would she feel that way? The minutes dragged on until he finally saw her. She was arriving, and just the sight of her in the distance made his heart race. He swallowed hard, trying to appear calm, but anxiety was taking over him again. She approached with the gentle smile that always brought him comfort. When she looked at him, her eyes sparkled with unmistakable energy, yet there was also a subtle curiosity, as if she was trying to understand what was behind this surprise. "Hi," she said softly, and the sound of her voice made his nervousness grow, as if she could read every thought he was trying to conceal. "Hi," he replied, feeling his throat dry. He looked at her, trying to summon the courage to say more, but the words seemed to have vanished from his mind. He smiled awkwardly, gesturing to the table. I thought it would be nice for us to spend an evening differently." She smiled, understanding the gesture, and sat down. But there was something in the way she looked at him, something that suggested she wasn't just curious about what he had planned. She seemed to get that he was trying to open up, to expose himself in a way that wasn't easy for him. And it was at that moment, while she looked around and began asking questions about the carefully prepared environment, that he realized the truth. It didn't matter what she thought about the surprise itself. What mattered was the fact that he was there, vulnerable and open, showing more of himself than he had ever allowed before. The game of expectations. The conversation flowed smoothly, but with a subtle intensity. He felt as if he were on an emotional roller coaster. Every word she spoke, every glance, seemed to hang heavy in the air. She didn't know he was scrutinizing himself, waiting for every little sign. With his soul full of uncertainties, he tried to decipher whether she was genuinely enjoying it or just being polite. Deep down, he knew he couldn't control her reaction, yet he still felt compelled to understand everything. His anticipation seemed to grow with each passing minute. He wanted to hear words from her that would validate what he was doing. He wanted to know in some way that she felt the same as he did, that she sensed the weight of it all. She played with the wine glass while looking around, noticing the little details he had prepared, the candles, the flowers, the arrangement of items on the table. "Did you really plan all of this?" she asked, her voice tinged with a hint of surprise, but not of the negative kind. It was an admiring surprise. He smiled, his breath growing heavier. "Yes, I wanted it to be special." That was all he needed to say, but there was a moment of silence between them, and in that silence he found himself questioning himself once again. What if she didn't like it? What if she thought it was over the top? But when he looked at her again, he saw that her eyes weren't distant or evasive. They were right there, attentive, seeking to understand him. Something about her calmed him, but it wasn't what he expected. It wasn't the certainty that she liked the surprise or that she was impressed. It was the feeling that in that moment she was there, completely present, willing to understand what he wanted to say without words. Her presence, her willingness to listen, was more than he could have asked for. "I'm really glad we're here," she said, breaking the silence. "You did all this because you wanted to make me happy, right?" He looked at her, speechless for a moment, until he finally managed to speak. "Yes, I wanted to do something meaningful." She smiled gently, and it was in that smile that he found the answer he had been searching for. There was no judgment, no distance, just a tacit acknowledgement that she was there, ready to share that moment with him. No rush, no expectations, just being there. The reflection of the gesture. The night continued at a leisurely pace, and as the minutes dragged on, he noticed that his anxiety was fading, not because he received confirmation that she was enchanted, but because he realized he no longer needed to prove anything. He didn't require a grand reaction to validate what he was doing. The simple fact that he had exposed himself in such a vulnerable and honest way made everything worthwhile, and it was in that instant that he remembered. The surprise wasn't about the gesture itself, but about the significance of giving of oneself, of risking being who he truly was. And then, the question that had been haunting him for weeks began to dissipate, as if it had dissolved in the lightness of that moment. Was he ready for everything that this meant? He knew the answer now, clearer than ever before. The biggest fear wasn't how she would react. The real fear was in not allowing himself to take the step. And by taking that step, he had already achieved something much greater than any reaction. He had conquered himself. The night remained calm, but there was something new in the air, a feeling that surprise had somehow shifted the dynamic between them, even if just for a moment. He began to realize that perhaps what he was seeking was not so much her approval of her reaction, but the courage to show himself as he truly was. That gesture, that vulnerability, was what he needed to finally stop hiding behind the fear of failure. She started talking about the little details, about the meaning of each thing. "You thought of everything," she said with a warm smile. At first he didn't know how to respond, as the warmth in her gaze made his heart race, and the anxiety that once consumed him dissipated as if it had never existed. But then, a heavier silence fell between them. Not an uncomfortable silence, but one of something profound, a connection that was beginning to form. He watched her for a moment, and realized that the surprise in its essence was not in the grandeur of the gesture. It was in the intention, in the sincere desire for that moment to be meaningful for both of them. He wanted her to know that he was willing to give himself fully, without holding anything back. Suddenly, she took a deep breath and leaned forward. He felt a wave of nervousness wash over him, fearing what she might say, but at the same time feeling an immense desire to hear what was coming next. "I didn't know you cared so much," she said softly, almost like a confession. Her voice, now calmer, carried a weight of gratitude, but also something more. She seemed touched, yet at the same time in some way surprised, as if she had discovered something new about him, something he hadn't revealed until now. He looked at her, momentarily at a loss for words. That sentence was everything he needed to hear, not because he sought validation, but because she understood how he felt, what he had been trying to convey all along. The romantic gesture, no matter how simple, had served its purpose. "I just wanted to show you that deep down I care about you in a way I can't express any other way," he said, the words coming more easily now, as if everything had finally clicked into place. She smiled, and her smile was a confirmation that his fear, though valid, wasn't necessary. He didn't need to worry about every reaction, every detail. What truly mattered was the sincerity behind what he was doing. "I see that now," she replied, "and that's what counts." And it was in that moment, in the small gesture that seemed to carry the weight of a great revelation, that he understood. He wasn't just creating a surprise. He was creating a space for the two of them to get to know each other even better, so they could finally connect on a deeper level, without reservation, without fear. Now he knew that even if there wasn't a perfect reaction, the act of opening up had already been worth it. Have you ever taken a risk for someone even with the fear of their reaction? Share your story and tell us how love transformed your journey.